الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان خلق الإنسان من صلصال كالفخار وخلق الجان من مارج من نار فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان رب المشرقين ورب المغربين فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان مرج البحرين يلتقيان بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان يخرج منهما اللؤلؤ والمرجان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان وله الجوار المنشآت في البحر كالأعلام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
Thank you very much, Brother Mehdi. Let's give him another loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I seek refuge from the accursed shaitan, and I begin in the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful. And I ask him to send the best of his blessings on the best of his creations, the Holy Prophet and his immaculate progeny, peace be upon them all, salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Respected scholars, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We welcome you all to the Islamic Center of America for another night of our UNI Ashura program. Tonight we're beginning our 8th night for this program, and we will be starting with, as usual, our two speakers, Sheikh Ibrahim Kazerooni and Sheikh Mehdi Hazari. Again, as I always do, I like to just ask everybody to please wear your masks. Let's continue to try to stay safe so we can keep coming to remember Imam Hussein alayhi salam and his fellow companions in Karbala. The numbers are still going up, so I'm going to keep reminding everybody and continue to ask everybody to wear masks. We have masks outside at the entrance for the office door. You can find them there, or you can come up to me and ask how you can get some as well. Thank you all for being safe and continuing to come to our programs. If anyone would like to sponsor any one of our nights, you can come up to me or Brother Anwar or Sister Malak, and we can tell you how you can do so, or you can visit our Instagram page at UNI.org, and you can also do it through there. On behalf of tonight's sponsor, they ask that we please recite Fatiha for the late Hajj Adib Harb and the late Hajj Hamoud Mekki. After loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Thank you all. Now, tonight's topic, we're going to be discussing, is being a citizen only possible in the Islamic nation? To start us off, we have our resident scholar, Sheikh Ibrahim Kazerooni. Let's give him the loud salawat that he likes to hear from us, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. There's no sound coming from the sister's side, so صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، نحمده ونشكره ونستعينه ونتوكل عليه، ثم الصلاة والسلام على حبيب إله العالمين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين وصحبه المنتجبين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت بقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. مولانا Hazari, sisters and brothers, السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يقول الله تبارك وتعالى في القرآن الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. O humankind, we have created you from a male and a female and made you into tribes and races so that you interact with each other. Surely the noblest among you or of you in Allah's sight is the one who is more pious. Allah knows all and aware of all things. I must start with the confession right at the beginning. When I read the topic, I really was confused as exactly if it has been a question that was posed to Maulana Hazari or somebody made a comment, because it wasn't quite clear whether the person was asking from juristical point of view, whether we can become citizen in the West or Western or non-Muslim countries in general, or what it was, the question was framed within the context of what we call social sciences that tries to understand the role of citizens in the Western world. So the theme is a little bit challenging. If those of you who are academically orientated, this theme in particular is being addressed in social science, political science, anthropology, and even post-colonialism, it's a vast subject. The notion of identity and citizenship. A few years ago, I was invited to go to Taft, a School of International Diplomacy in Boston, and the interface between religion and citizenship drew the most crowd and the most papers. And I sat there wondering how the scholars are struggling between the citizenship on one side and how in the multi-layered citizenship that we have, or identity that we have these days, the role of faith and religion can play within that context. I want to start to lay the foundation of how difficult it is with few statistics. You can go to Pew Research on Muslim around the world, and there is probably 30, 40 pages of research done on this regard. More than 300 million Muslims, or 1/5 of the world Muslim population, live in countries where Islam is not a majority religion. And there are two types. They are living in their own country that happen to be non-Muslim country, but yet there is a huge minority, such as China, India, Ethiopia, and few other countries. And those who migrated to the West, like all of us, that we have created a minority within the Western world, that still the majority is non-Muslim. These minority Muslim populations are often quite large. India, for example, has the third largest population of Muslims worldwide. And huge Shia community as well. For people who came out of Najaf, such as myself, without the Shia community in India, the Hawza in Najaf would have collapsed during Marhum Sayyid Abul Hassan's time and before. It was their generous contribution during the time where the scholars or the grand scholars really had no access to money per se. This generous contribution kept the Hawza in Najaf going. China has more Muslims than Syria, while Russia is home to more Muslims than Jordan and Libya combined. While 80% of the world Muslims live in countries where Muslims are in majority, significant numbers, about 1/5 of the world Muslim population, live through various diaspora, which is non-Muslims. Of the 317 million Muslims living as minority, 240 million of them living in, which is about 3/4, in 3 countries, India, Ethiopia, and China. In Russia, 2 types of a Muslim minority: those who will live, born over there, and those who moved to Russia as a place of refuge. Recently, statistics given about the European countries. Germany stands at number 1 with about 4.5 million Muslims. Although the number of Muslims in UK is close to 3, some people say more. In the United States, we don't have any clear statistics to say that exact number of Muslims in the United States, how much. There is an estimate that we are the second minority after the Christians. The Jewish community will be the third. And the challenge is, as we are living in these minority state, sometimes minority within the minority, as we live, how do we define our identity? And whether citizenship of, say, United States, Europe, any European country, clearly establishes the parameter for our identity or is still something else. A conference organized in London in 1980, when I had just moved to London, and the same debate existed. I have a book which was the collection of the articles presented in that conference. The same challenge at that time. How do we define who we are as Muslim community in a minority state? Is it the food that we eat? Or is it the dress that we wear? Is it the ideology that we have? Or what is it? So that challenge or fact that we are, say, UK citizen, or American citizen, or Canadian citizen, what does that tell us about our own identity? I want to start the nation state, which involves wedding. What is the notion of nation state? The Westphalia and after that. Nation state, in essence, ties a group of people to a particular space within a certain boundary. Involves wedding a specific people to a sovereign territorial entity. This itself is a modern phenomenon. For example, Italian city-states did not unify itself into a coherent modern state until 1850. Germany became a modern state that we recognize under Prussia is around 1871. So the question is, does Islam have anything in it that opposes the concept of nationhood state or citizenhood of a nationhood state or not? Islam contains teaching that might argue around certain aspect of the nationhood state, but not in itself. Argue against the most important element of nationalism. When we define nationalism in a way, a chauvinistic exclusiveness, that we can use it at the expense of the other. Now, we go to our literature, we see at the beginning of our history, the Holy Prophet ﷺ combated tribalism based on asabiyya, the negative concept of asabiyya, that you use your own identity, tribal identity, as a justification to subject other tribes that existed at the time, or here call it other nation. Subject others to whatever you decide. In the political science lingo, we call it, in the context of United States, we call it American exceptionalism. Because we are who we are, then God has given us the right to subject other people to all kinds of, call it war and everything else, because we are the best. And that's this aspect that normally we have in the Western understanding of teaching against nationalism is something that Islam rejects. Islam does not reject the idea of a nation. Far from it. If you look at the history of the prophets, prophets came to different nations to begin with, particularly minor prophets. All of the prophets before Prophet Muhammad were sent to a specific nation. However, if the shared identity that we want to use to define who we are, we use it at the expense, we give ourselves the right to subjugate and somehow colonize other nations, this part of it is considered to be objectionable. Why? Because the essence, when Islam came, removed tribalism. And the Holy Prophet, كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. There is a clear dynamic and synthesis between people of the world. Whether they are, we look at them as human beings, even with Muslims and beyond. Every one of you is a steward. And each of you will be asked concerning their responsibility towards the others, To the point with regard to the Islam, Muslim community, من أصبح ولم يهتم بأمور المسلمين فليس بمسلم. Now, if the notion of identity and citizen draws some kind of a shift or a line between me as a Muslim vis-a-vis others, then it becomes a problem. Because that basic tenets that Quran has clearly established, that I have a responsibility as Muslims towards everybody else, is rejected. If it is rejected, part of this identity. We have a number of countries that they define their own citizenship and identity at the expense of somebody else. The Zionist project in Palestine, the American, the British colonialism, and so on and so forth. So when the Prophet was asked about the fanatical tribalism, al-asabiyya, by the way, in the contemporary literature, particularly after Ibn Khaldun, there are two definitions of al-asabiyya, or that one of it is the negative one, that the Holy Prophet interprets it as tribalism. Ibn Khaldun, in his theory of ascent and descent of nation, interprets al-asabiyya as cohesion. That's not what I mean here as a negative. That's necessary. But in the original sense that the Holy Prophet used in rejecting tribalism, the negative concept of asabiyya is something that is rejected. He says when the Prophet was asked about fanatical tribalism, he replied, it is aiding and abetting your clan while oppressing the other. And this has to be rejected. Islam begins, if we go back to the verse that I recited, Islam begins with that humans share a common ancestry. A man and a woman, call it Adam and Eve. They're all descendant of Adam and Eve. Islam doesn't reject diversity and multiplicity of nations. What Islam wants, that the multiplicity and diversity that exists could become the source of convergence and learning from each other. Here is another point. If we define citizenship at the expense of this idea, then it becomes problematic. But the whole debate about the notion, it really is so extensive that we cannot, I'm sure Maulana Hazari is going to deal with it, but we cannot spend huge amount of time to explain exactly. So many definitions about citizenship, so many criteria. At the moment, there was another conference in Chicago University that the theme was multi-layered citizenship and identity. So we are no longer talking about one identity, multi-layered identity. The world is becoming more complex. So while recognizing the validity of national, racial, tribal, ethnic, and cultural differences, Islam views them as a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is a verse in the Holy Quran that if Allah wanted and wished, Allah could have created a monolithic community, a singular approach, but He didn't. There is a purpose for that, so that we create that cohesion that Ibn Khaldun talks about through interaction with each other, not through al-asabiyya and racial or tribal understanding that I am superior than somebody else. And unfortunately, in every community we have it. In every community we have it. We still are not prepared to get away from the word abd when we refer to African Americans. It's part of the lingo. You may try, I have tried to talk to a number of people, well, you live where the abds are. This is part of the whole thing that Islam doesn't want. Islam has made it clear that there are no differences between individuals. Only taqwa will be the clear identity. So what we really need as Muslim, particularly for the younger generations that are in academia, we really need to understand the concept of citizenship, understand the concept of identity, to understand the interface between these two, and develop our response coherently and properly, so that we can explain exactly what we want to see from citizenship and identity for the future, where we can be comfortable while we are citizens of a particular country, and yet at the same time comfortable of feeling responsible for the others. It hasn't to be either or. Inshallah, I leave that to Maulana Hazari to continue with it. May Allah guide us to our responsibilities, no matter what citizenship we choose in our life. And some of you might have multi-citizenship, Lebanese, Iraqi, US, British, whatever, French, and depending on where you come from, and whether it was colonized by the French, by German, whatever it is. So no matter how you define your citizenship, we really have a responsibility to discharge our duties towards other Muslims and everybody else. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I made it with 1 minute before the time.
Ahsant, Maulana. Thank you very much for starting us off with this interesting topic that we have here today. Just a reminder, in case there's anyone who hasn't filled out our survey yet, we did send out a survey, I believe 2 days ago, that we sent to our WhatsApp group chat, and it's also on our bio under our UNI Instagram page. Just a very brief survey on how you think the program's going, just to give a review of our group and the speakers and the program itself. So if you guys could take just a minute or two just to check that out, or you can come up to me and ask how you can find that survey if you're not able to find it. We can go from there, inshallah. Now I would like to introduce our next speaker, Sheikh Mehdi Hazari. Let's welcome him with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli.
على حب فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا رسول الله، وعلى أهل بيتك المعصومين الأبرار الميامين المظلومين المضطهدين. السلام عليك وعلى ولدك المظلوم أبي عبد الله الحسين. يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة، يا غريب، يا مظلوم، يا عطشان كربلاء، ما خاب والله من تمسك بكم وأمنا من لجأ والتجأ إليكم. يا ليتنا فيا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله الذي خلق 7 سماوات ومن الأرض مثلهن يتنزل الأمر بينهن لتعلموا أن الله على كل شيء قدير وأن الله قد أحاط بكل شيء علما. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. والسلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. My dear brothers and sisters, first I want to start off by saying how much I benefit and enjoy listening to Sheikh Kazerooni, particularly because of the academic approach he takes and the poignant way he discusses these topics. MashaAllah, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. And it makes my task so much easier when you have an introduction, really, and by no means am I anyone to have someone give me an introduction, but really providing such deep context and understanding to topics that then I can sort of coast through, which is something I've done well in my life, coasting on the efforts of other people. But in all honesty, when we thought of the topic and the title for the topic, it is indeed broad, and it is not easily defined. And by no means is there ever this question, as Samahat al-Sheikh very nicely mentioned, that Islam ever sort of gives you a gray area as to whether you should be a citizen or not. The question is, how is it possible in an environment where you are not necessarily surrounded by people who live by the code that you do, don't follow the religion that you do? And maybe in Dearborn, it's not as much of a question to be answered because, mashallah, there's so many Muslims here. But in the rest of the country, where I come from, where I live, where most other Shia Muslim or Muslim Americans live, or Muslims in North America live, or Muslims in the West live, you can see that it's not as simple to determine what is citizenship and how you determine its responsibility. And that is the goal, that is the key, is navigating not only your identity when it comes to citizenship, but certainly what it is required of you in that identity. And I think that is, the second part is particularly the one that's taken for granted, that we don't really give as much importance in the course of our life. And I think the main reason why is because we feel disconnected to some degree. We're neither here nor there. We're American, we're Canadian, we're British, we're French, but we are also Muslim. We coast and sort of hang in this middle area, this gray area. And some of that is what leads to dissonance. When people struggle with their identities, it's because of this. It's because you are hovering in this middle region, this gray region. And that's what you have to try to navigate and understand. And see how is it you relate to the world in which you live. And maybe this is where the root of the question lies. That in a Muslim society, if I were growing up in Lebanon, if I was growing up in Iraq, if I was growing up in Afghanistan, and again, taking the name of Afghanistan, please keep them in your prayers, particularly the Shia of Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salatu was-salam, who are now facing perilous moments due to what is happening. If I were to live in those Muslim countries, my identity is what the whole crowd has. I blend in, I fit in. There's no navigating because I am part of the stream that flows through whatever society I am living in. It is here where you have to determine what do I relate to and what don't I relate to. What am I a part of and what am I not a part of? And how much significance does that have in my life? What weight does that have in my life? So let's begin. You know that in the 602nd year, year 602, this is approximately 20 years before the hijrah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Rasulullah left Mecca and came to Medina in 622. So in 602, there were two main kingdoms that were fighting in the east. One was Persia and the other was Rome. And you know that their battles had continued for a very long time. Now the Roman emperor at that time, his name was Phocas. Phocas was a man who had taken over by deposing or killing, assassinating the previous emperor whose name was Maurice. Maurice was killed by Phocas, who took over, and the peace that had existed, or at least the stalemate that had existed between Rome and Persia, was broken. So now Khusro II, who was the emperor or the king of Persia, decided he's going to attack. And when he attacked Rome, another series of battles ensued, one by one. They fought for years, and really the goal was what? Geopolitical, acquiring as much land as you can, acquiring as much influence as you can, and politically controlling as much region of the area as possible, and not allowing it to someone else. Obviously, availing yourself to the resources that are available, manpower, societies, everything that is there. You're trying to build upon your empire. In those early years, in particular, in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, prior to his hijrah, Rasulullah had already now announced his message to the people. And he would call saying, قُولُوا لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ تُفْلِحُوا. When Rasulullah, he proclaimed his message, he emphasized the La ilaha illallah immediately. It was the first thing. Why? Because most of the people worshipped idols. People had hundreds of gods that they had to worship. And the idols were made out of ordinary things like sticks and rocks. And so Rasulullah, he came and immediately he said, look, believe in the oneness of Allah because that is your salvation. If you do not start there, you will lose from the beginning. You will find yourself to be in delusion and at a loss. You will be misguided and astray. So bringing this message out in the early years, particularly 5 to 7 years after his proclamation in Mecca, how difficult were the moments for the believers? Extremely difficult for the believers. And not only was it difficult, what was happening in the world was influencing the Muslims who were now starting to join the religion of Islam in Mecca. This is prior to Hijrah. One of the things that happened was that two of the Persian generals, they had overcome, their army was very strong, they had overcome the Roman army and taken over large swaths of land, lots and lots of land. Persia had descended into Syria, into what was Babylon, basically Iraq. They had descended into what is Palestine. They had spread into Egypt. They were spreading everywhere. Now this word comes to the Arabian Peninsula, to where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam is, and it sort of shakes the foundations of this new religion that he is proclaiming. Now you may ask that why is that important? whether the Romans are beating the Persians or the Persians are beating the Romans. Well, the minute the news of this came down to the Arabian Peninsula, the pagan Arabs who were worshipping the idols, who were staunchly against Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam and the birth of his religion, meaning the spread of his religion, they came and they started to taunt the Muslims. They started to say that, look, the Persians who are idol worshippers like us, they are overcoming the Romans who are Christians, believers in the oneness of God. They are muwahhideen. And so you can see that they would use this as a means of dissuading people from becoming Muslim and taunting and scaring those who had already become Muslim, to say to them that, look, you're joining a losing cause. You're joining a religion that is not true. And you can see by the successes and the victories of the Persians, who are idol worshippers, over the muwahhideen, the ones who believe in the oneness of God, the Christians, that truly this is the case. Now you know that this might shake people of lesser faith, and that the question of this becomes quite profound. And yet, Allah immediately sends a verse of the Holy Quran in this moment. He says, غُلِبَتَ الرُّومُ فِي أَدْنَى الْأَرْضِ وَهُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ غَلْبِهِمْ سَيَغْلِبُونَ. He says, the Romans have been defeated, indeed. You know, Surah Ar-Rum. The Romans have been defeated, and it's in a faraway place from here, but know that after being defeated, that victory surely will be theirs. Victory will be theirs. Allah, He says in the same surah, in the next ayah, لِلَّهِ النَّصْرُ مِنْ قَبْلُ وَمِنْ بَعْدِ. Allah will have the victory from before and from after. Always God is victorious. وَيَوْمَئِذٍ يَفْرَحُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ بِنَصْرِ اللَّهِ. When God's victory comes, the believers, it says believers, will be pleased and happy that Allah overcame, that Allah was victorious. Allah supported who? In this case, when you say Nasrallah or Nasrallah, you are talking about God's support for somebody. In this case, who did He support? Well, it so happened that after the Hijrah took place, several years after the Hijrah, they say Heraclius, who was the new Roman emperor, what did he do? He established his army and he started to advance on the Persians. And the old gains that the Persians had made down in Syria, in Palestine, in Egypt, now the Romans started to knock them out, push them back, and hand them defeat after defeat after defeat after defeat. And so when the Quran says, when the Nasr of Allah is coming, who is it coming for? In this case, it wasn't for the Muslims. Muslims weren't fighting battles in this moment. It was for these Romans who were believers in the oneness of Allah. Indeed, the other things we are not discussing now, but the core of their belief was the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so when Allah says that وَيَوْمَئِذٍ يَفْرَحُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ بِنَصْرِ اللَّهِ, the believers are happy. Why? Because God's support came and allowed the Romans to defeat the Persians, who were idol worshippers, and now reassured the faith. But why do I make this point? Because there's a commonality. Yes, they're Christian, but there is a commonality of faith in the sense of oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the ayah itself is tying the two together, saying, look, understand the fact that those who believe in the oneness of God, that indeed these are people who have some amount of closeness to you. Yes, the religions differ. There are differences in aqa'id, in practices, etc. But there is a closeness to you that you must recognize. That is an important thing to really think about. Because in our societies, we are not surrounded by people who are Muslim in its majority. We are surrounded by a majority that is not Muslim. And again, I'm not talking Dearborn is an anomaly, all right? So the rest of the country, you are surrounded by people who don't practice your religion, adhere to your code of religious ethos in this case. And so how do you navigate that? Well, the ayah, it explained it. That look, the believers, they rejoiced. Why? Because the Christians overcame the idol worshippers. It reassured them of the power of God. And what that suggests to you in terms of your position with respect to them in society. In any case, what then happens to us? Do we stop at La ilaha illallah? And that is enough to create a bond between us and other non-Muslim citizens. Well, for us, it must go further. In terms of our belief and adherence to religion, La ilaha illallah is just the start. There is a verse of the Quran that says, الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَصَدُّوا عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَضَلَّ أَعْمَالَهُم. Allah says, there are some people who deny God. They do kufr. And they moved away from the path of God. They moved away from the path of God. God took and made their actions go astray. Their actions went completely astray. Then in the next ayah, it says, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَآمَنُوا بِمَا نُزِّلَ عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ وَهُوَ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّهِمْ كَفَّرَ عَنْهُمْ سَيِّئَاتِهِمْ وَأَصْلَحَ بَالَهُمْ. Allah says, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, those who believe, وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, and did good deeds, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِمَا نُزِّلَ عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ. Now, did anyone capture what I just said? The verse. And picking up on yesterday, see the beauty of the Quran. Those who believe, it says, those who do good deeds, and those who believe. It says believe twice. It says those who believe and do good deeds. Now, if you say someone believes, what is your assumption? That they believe in everything, right? It's not that they believe conditionally, it's that they believe in everything. So if you say, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, that is a general phrase that covers every form of belief, all of your belief. Meaning you believe in what? You believe in Allah, you believe in His Rasul, you believe in His Kitab, you believe in A'imma al-Athhar, Yawm al-Qiyamah, etc., 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 on and on. But this verse, what does it say? It says, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, those who believe and do good deeds, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, and وَآمَنُوا بِمَا نُزِّلَ عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ, that which has been sent down on Muhammad. They not only believe and do good deeds, they also believe in that which has been sent down on Muhammad. Singling out and emphasizing the role of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. So when it comes to our identity, when it comes to our citizenship and who we are, we must follow and understand this concept that it stems from our belief in Rasulullah and what he represents to us. That is key. And that shows us sort of how we behave and what we do in life. And this, by extension, goes to A'imma al-Athhar alayhimus salatu wassalam. There's a story, a very nice story, in which Zurara ibn A'yun, one of the great companions of Al-Imam al-Baqir and Al-Imam al-Sadiq alayhim as-salam. They say Zurara, he comes to Al-Imam al-Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam, and he asks this question. He says, there is a verse of the Quran, Ya ibn Rasulillah, that says, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ عَلَى حَرْفٍ فَإِنْ أَصَابَهُ خَيْرٌ اطْمَأَنَّ بِهِ. There are some people who believe in God, their belief in God, their worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is on a harf, meaning they are teetering on the edge of belief and not really knowing what they have conviction in. They're not strong in their belief. So if this person, something good happens to them, they believe. They become content and they believe. وَإِنْ أَصَابَتْهُ فِتْنَةٌ انْقَلَبَ عَلَى وَجْهِهِ خَسِرَ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ. If something bad happens to them, what happens? They fall back on their face, meaning what? They stop believing, or they start to doubt, and they have suspicion. Zurara, he asks Imam al-Baqir, he says, Ya ibn Rasulillah, what is the significance of this verse? That these people who worship God ala harfin, meaning they're teetering on the edge almost. What does it mean? And I say this to you, reminding myself that are there moments when I believe in Allah, worship Allah on the edge, such that God forbid if something happens, I'll slip and I fall down the edge of that cliff. I have to ask myself that question. So Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, he says to Zurara, Zurara, this verse has been sent down for those people who believe in God. They trust in God 100%. They know 100% that La ilaha illallah. And they believe in Rasulullah, but they have some doubt. They believe in Rasulullah, but they have a little bit of doubt. So that if, God forbid, their life is good, everything is okay, they'll believe with certainty. They'll trust in what Muhammad is giving them. However, if something happens to them, then anything that he gives, they will question it. And they will doubt in his risala, in his message. They will not take it from him. They will not accept from him so easily. They will question everything that is being presented to him. In that case, it behooves us to understand exactly what it means to be Muhammadi, meaning to follow that code of Rasulullah. Why? And again, you may ask the question, what does this have to do with citizenship? Because if you don't know what it means to be a citizen down at its core, how are you going to be able to implement it or use it or practice it in life? That is the main thing to consider. And you see the Shia, over the course of the lives of the A'imma al-Athhar, how their citizenship, and I will use this term citizenship, changed. From Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam's time, all the way through Imam al-Husayn's time. What did the Shia do? Very few. In Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam's time, the riwayat, what do they say? That you could count on two hands the number of true Shia who were there following Imam Ali alayhi salam. True Shia. Men like Salman al-Farsi, Aba Dhar, Miqdad, Bilal, you know the names, all of them, the same people. Those same men, what did they do? Some of them were vocal, like Aba Dhar. Some were a little more reserved, but worshipful. People like Uwais al-Qarani, people like Salman al-Farsi. But these men continue to do and respond to the needs of the community. Salman al-Farsi became a governor. Other individuals were given governorships in the same manner. Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr was the same manner, who was a follower and student of Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam. And you see the difficulties that they faced through the life of Imam al-Hasan and Imam Hussein alayhim as-salam. It's after this that it becomes a little more interesting. In the life of Imam as-Sajjad, particularly, when the Banu Umayyah were hurling bombs onto Medina, hurling bombs onto Mecca, the Shia had recoiled quite a bit. And yet when the Banu Umayyah were weakened in the time of Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam in the 132nd year after Hijrah, you see that now the Shia come out. And what do? They become teachers. They engage in discourses, educational discourses, religious discourses. They spread the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They provide services to the community, all following the example of the Imams. Until you get to the time of Imam al-Kadhim and Imam al-Ridha alayhim as-salam. Imam Kadhim's time was very difficult, very hard. Yet even though he had a companion named Ali ibn Yaqtin, I'm not sure if you've heard, I'm sure you've heard the name Ali ibn Yaqtin. Ali ibn Yaqtin, he was a great companion of Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam, and he was given a position in the government of the Banu Abbas, particularly by al-Mehdi al-Abbasi. After Mansur al-Dawaniqi, he was given a position. So Ali ibn Yaqtin was a Shia, true follower of Imam al-Kadhim of Ahl al-Bayt, but always worried about his position in this government. Yet Imam al-Kadhim always reminded him and even taught him to practice taqiyya, meaning dissimulation, meaning to hide his true self, continue working in the government of this Banu Abbas, but do good services. Now tell me, how do you enact a citizenship like this? That's got to be the hardest form of citizenship, isn't it? Where you've got an antagonistic regime, government, that's on top of you, and yet you still are there providing services and doing what you are supposed to. Same with Imam al-Ridha. Even though Ma'mun feigned to love Imam Ridha, it was the same. And then the lives of Imam al-Jawad, al-Hadi, al-Askari, you see, are very difficult. There is no openness. And the Shia prepare for the occultation of the 12th Imam. Everything becomes difficult. Yet still they are a part of society, working and struggling away. Now, we enter into our own lives here, yes? Now, why am I saying all of this? Because by now you know that you have to be a good citizen. And the history shows to us that even in Medina, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, in the constitution of Medina, he said everybody is responsible for the well-being of Medina, the safety of Medina. Muslim, Christian, anybody who comes under the category of being a resident of Medina, if there's an assault on Medina, everyone is responsible, not just the Muslims. Why? Because we are all citizens together. We are all taking care of each other together. Everyone is responsible. This is the trend through society in the Shi'i times, in the times of the Imams, and later on. Everyone bore that responsibility. And so you come to modern times and you ask yourself, well, what is it I'm supposed to do? And so let me add a bit of a disclaimer now and really give myself a way out, all right? By no means are all these things over the last few nights that I've been telling you all-inclusive. They're not comprehensive. I'm touching on and maybe just barely scratching the surface of these topics. These topics cannot be, like Sheikh Kazerooni already mentioned, addressed in a simple 40, 50, 1-hour speech. It's just not possible. But to understand with as much practicality what it means to be Muslim and translate that into an action that is practical. So now we come to our societies, and you all know that you come into the society and you're surrounded by people who are not like you. They're not Muslim like you. They don't believe like you. So what do you do? What's your role? Well, obviously, it's the things that you should be doing. You should be honest, follow the laws, never break the laws. Our Maraja al-Kiram, all of them, this supreme religious authority says it very clearly and unequivocally that you are not allowed to break laws. Even though you live in a non-Muslim country, you must follow the laws. You must be a good citizen. You must contribute to the well-being of that country, and in particular focus on those things that will bring goodness for Muslims, and do what you can to make the environment in which you live a good one. Now this is where we come to, all right? So I'm going to ask you a question. Let's say you're in a coffee shop, okay? I know there's a Tim Hortons up the street from here. Not up the street, this way maybe. I think that way or this way. My directions are all off. There's a Tim Hortons. And I take Tim Hortons because I'm Canadian. I'm a proud Canadian. That's a Canadian institution. The best donuts, better than Dunkin' Donuts. And I'm not an influencer that now suddenly there'll be a line in front of Tim Hortons. You go into Tim Hortons, yeah, and you're sitting there and a person comes in and they're well-dressed, sharp, you know. They're wearing, I don't know, Banana Republic, Polo, something good, you know. They've got good perfume. The men are not looking at the women, and the women are not looking at the men. This is all just unigender, okay, this example, okay? So this person's dressed well, Chanel 5 for the women, little, I don't know, Polo for the men, something like that, dressed good. They come in, you don't know who they are, you see their face, and you think to yourself, what? Man, they must be successful, well-kept, you know, sharp, cut, well-dressed, look good, beautiful face, come in, they must be successful, must be smart, must be achieved, etc. Automatically, I guarantee you that's your thought. Guarantee it's your thought. Versus another person comes in, they're wearing sports clothes, okay? As if they just came out of the gym. A little sweaty, they got on their Adidas, okay? I wear Adidas, so I know. You have your Adidas, you got your t-shirt, whatever, long sleeve, etc. You come in, you're a little sweaty like you went to the gym. You look at them, you don't know who they are. You think, wow, they must have worked hard, right? Someone came out for the gym. What's the first thing you thought? They were just in the gym, working out. They were doing something, expending some energy. You're still sitting there in Tim Hortons. You see a third person come in. This third person is completely disheveled, okay? Wearing tattered clothes, hair's all messed up. I don't want to say ugly, but not appealingly beautiful. They look like they just, I don't know, walked out of a nightmare somewhere, okay? Let's just put it like that. What are you going to think? You're going to look at them and you're going to say, man, what a mess, right? You're going to say, what a mess. And the first thing you're going to think, that person's not very smart. They're probably not very achieved. They're probably not educated. They probably have some lowly, crappy job, etc., etc., etc. You get my point, right? Who's to say that that disheveled person isn't a neurosurgeon? And just, you know, he or she was working in their yard and got really soiled and dirty and decided, I want a coffee from Tim Hortons, and decided they didn't want to get washed. But you would never know that. Why? This is something called the halo effect. I don't know if you've heard this. The concept of the halo effect is 100 years old, almost. All right? It's quite old. It's not new. And it's used in marketing. Marketing uses this a lot. But it's evident everywhere. And what's the halo effect? So I look at a picture of Hajj Alex, okay? Beautiful picture. He's so handsome, yeah? He's standing right there. I got this beautiful picture, you know, Hajj Alex right in front of me. What am I going to think? I look at it and I think to myself, smart guy, sharply dressed, educated, head on his shoulders, etc., etc., etc. All these things I have in my mind. That's the halo effect. The halo effect is I don't know anything about this person, but the picture I saw created inside of my mind something I'm going to think about them next. I've already decided what they are. I've already designed it in my mind based on how I look at them. Versus, I look at another picture, and that picture is not appealing to me. It's not beautiful. It doesn't look good. Let's just say my picture, okay? You look at my picture, and khalas, that's it. You think, oh my God, what nightmare did he walk out of, right? So my picture, you look at it, and you're like, who hit him with the ugly stick? So that, in contrast to the halo effect, is called the horn effect, okay? Two things. Halo effect, you look positive. You think positive thoughts. The person could be a complete scumbag, all right? It may be a beautiful picture, but the person could be total scum, totally lowlife. But you just don't know. It's just your mind already has decided. It's got this preconceived notion of what they're going to do. They're successful, they're smart, they do everything good, they can run 100 meters in like less than 40 seconds, blah, blah, blah. And the horn effect is the complete opposite. You look at the picture, and I by no means am I like horn effect, and I'm looking at the sisters. No, please, don't take it that way. I'll look this way. The horn effect is that you look at the picture, it may not be an ugly picture. It may not be scary looking, but you conceptualize something that's negative. Now I ask you, in the non-Muslim countries where we live, where we've been born, we grow up, how many times they see a long beard, and what do you think they think about it? Anybody thinks about it? Probably not great, maybe, right? There are a lot of people who are educated, cultured, they know Muslims are citizens, part of this community, do everything, vote, and participate, and are politicians, doctors, and are ingrained in society from the very start. But how many people look at those pictures of a sister in a hijab and say what? That she must be so uneducated, right? That's so common. They look at in fact, how many times are they treated in that manner, right? And you sisters know this. My wife, my daughter experienced the same thing. That, oh, you've got a college degree? That must be amazing. You must be like 1 out of a million, right? No, that's not how it is. But you've painted a picture. You've done what is called the horn effect. And so I ask you, that what's our responsibility in all of this? And this is what I'm talking about when I talk about citizenship. That after Karbala, whose voice is heard louder than anyone else's voice? Sayyidah Zainab, no? Even after Rasul's demise, Rasulullah passed from this world, and whose voice comes out thundering, shaking the world? It was not Imam Ali alayhi salam who gave a long speech in the mosque, was it? No, it was those people, it was that person or that class of people or that gender of people who everyone else had thought, oh, well, they're just a weak, the fairer gender. Relegate them to the homes, and they are nothing. They can do nothing. And yet, what did Islam do? Sayyidah Fatima stood up to break this stereotype. In the same manner, what did Sayyidah Zainab do? You don't think Imam Zain al-Abidin, yes, he was sick, but he's Imam now. Imam Hussein's gone. He's Imam now. He can't stand up and speak. And he did he not? But Sayyidah Zainab spoke first. She shattered the ceiling. She thundered at them like her father would have done. In the same manner, what is the responsibility on us as citizens? And that's what I'm talking about when I say, how are you going to be a citizen in a non-Islamic or a society in which you are a citizen of that is predominantly non-Muslim? And we must be good citizens of our country, our nation, and contribute and give good and help everybody, irrespective of religion, background, creed. We must be good citizens. But we must do so by trying to break those stereotypes, by fighting hard to achieve what we didn't achieve in the past. So people can look at us and say, these are the followers of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad alayhim as-salatu was-salam. Salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. This is the legacy of Karbala. And what does it do? It creates social engagement. If citizenship is anything, it is social engagement. It is ensuring that every segment of the population is connected. And it creates something called social capital. Social capital means what? If I have capital, it means I have some asset, some possession that is valuable, that allows me to do things. Social capital means you have some amount of benefit, something positive, and a social asset that you can use for your betterment in society. Does everyone in society have social capital? No, they don't. So many are disenfranchised. And yet that's what Islam came to teach us, is that create social capital for everybody. Imam Ali alayhi salam did it for the poor Christian man at the end of his life. They took care of everyone irrespective of their religion and their background. Create social capital. Help. If you're educated, create a chance for someone else to be educated. If you have a means to get an education, go get it and then open the door for someone else. If you have a job, you have someone who you know who doesn't have a job, help them find a job. Don't say, oh, well, I got educated, I got my job, and then that's it. I have forgotten about everyone. That is not Islam. That is not citizenship. And that is not going to break any ceiling by any means. To get to those heights, you have to sacrifice. And that's the legacy of Al-Imam al-Hussein. You all know that when Al-Imam al-Hassan, and maybe we don't talk about Al-Imam al-Hassan so much, when he was poisoned and he was lying on his deathbed, they say the companion came in. He saw him lying there. He says, I saw my master yellow, pale, color's gone from his face. Next to his bed lay a pan. The poison had basically eaten up the inside of his body. And what did he do? Every so often, he would turn to the side of the bed. The companion came and asked him that, Yabna Rasulillah, you are lying on your deathbed. There's this pan. What is this? Would you like me to get you some water or something? Imam al-Hassan, he says, no, this pan is because every so often the blood is coming out of my mouth from the poison. And I have to spit it out. The insides are coming out of Al-Imam Aba Muhammad. They say the companion, he looks at him. He says, Yabna Rasulillah, limada la tu'alij nafsak? Why do you not find a cure for yourself? They say, Imam al-Hassan, he says to him, قال له بكل صراحة بماذا أعالج الموت? He says to him with all candor, frankness, that how am I going to cure death? There is no cure for death. Al-Imam al-Hassan, even then, it is described that when Imam Hussein would come into the room, he would begin to cry. Older brother is crying for the younger brother. Imam Hussein would come to him and ask him that, my brother, why are you crying like this? They say, Al-Imam al-Hassan, he says to him, I am crying for you, Ya Aba Abdullah. He says, the one who's going to feed me the poison will just give it to me. I will get sick and I will die immediately. ولكن لا يوم كيومك يا أبا عبد الله. There is no day like your day, Ya Aba Abdullah. Thousands, tens of thousands of soldiers will line up, will gather to attack you, claiming to be from the community of our grandfather. They will not stop until they have drawn your blood and martyred those who you love. On the day of Ashura, Al-Imam al-Hussein watched all of his companions go out to the battlefield. One by one, they gave their lives. Each time Imam Hussein will go to the battlefield, climb on his horse, race out, pick up the bodies on his chest, carry them one by one back to the camp. when the companions had all been martyred. The youth of the Banu Hashim, they came and gathered together, each one of them vying to be the first to go out to the battlefield. They say that at one point, finally, Al-Qasim ibn al-Hasan, he comes forward to talk to his uncle Al-Imam al-Hussein. He says, Ya Amma, أتأذن لي بالقتال. My uncle, do you give me permission to go out and fight? Al-Imam al-Hussein turns to him and he says, No, Ya Qasim, how can I give you permission? When you were entrusted to me by my brother Al-Hasan, you are the last sign of my brother Al-Hasan. How can I send you to the battlefield where everyone has died and gone? They say that Qasim would leave disappointed. He would come back to Al-Imam al-Hussein and again ask him and again request to go to the battlefield. They say that finally dejected Qasim goes back to the tent. He says to his mother Ramla that my mother, my uncle Al-Hussein will not give me permission to fight. How do I get permission? They say that Ramla, she says to him that go and tell your uncle Al-Hussein that it was the wish of your father Al-Hasan that when he is not present because he is gone from the world and cannot support and defend his brother Al-Hussein, he has left you, O Qasim, as his representative. Qasim, now pleased, returns back to Al-Imam al-Hussein. He says, Ya Amma, أتأذن لي بالقتال. My uncle, do you give me permission to fight? They say Imam Hussein, he asks him, Ya Qasim, كيف ترى الموت? How do you see death to be, O Qasim? Qasim, he says, إنه أحلى من العسل. It is sweeter to me, more pleasing and desirous than even the honey. They say that Imam Hussein would not give him any answer. فلا زال يقبل يديه ويتوسل إليه. Just like a child when they want something from the parent, begs and pleads and kisses the hand of the parent. Al-Qasim keeps kissing the hands of his uncle Al-Hussein, keeps asking him to give him permission. Finally, Al-Imam Al-Hussein nazala ila Al-Qasim, he kneeled down to the ground. وَاعْتَنَقَهُ وَبَكِيَا. He hugged him and Qasim began to weep and cry. Finally, Imam Hussein, he says, اذهب يا قاسم فقد أذنت لك. Go, I have given you permission to go. Qasim, he stands there in front of his uncle Al-Hussein. Al-Imam Al-Hussein puts the armor on him, puts the amama of his brother Al-Hasan on his head, takes him and sends him off to the battlefield. It is related that Qasim was so small that the sword would drag in the sand of Karbala. He climbed on his horse and began to race out to the battlefield, fighting the enemy soldiers, calling out to them. He says to them, إن كنتم تنكروني فأنا نجل الحسن. If you deny who I am the son of Al-Hasan al-Mujtaba. They fought him from every side, striking him. They say in one moment that the strap of his sandal was torn. As a young child might do, unaware, he stopped to fix the sandal. He stopped to repair the sandal in the middle of the battlefield. When the enemy soldier saw him doing so, unheedful of the assault of the enemy, he said to the other soldier that I am going to strike this young man now that he is not paying attention. He took his spear and sent it flying against Al-Qasim, striking Al-Qasim, who yelled out as he fell, Assalamu alayka ya Amma. Adrikni ya Amma. Answer me, help me ya Amma, I am falling to the ground. They came around him, they struck him with their swords. When Al-Imam Al-Hussein saw that Qasim was surrounded, he got on his horse and charged the battlefield like an angry lion. They say the enemy soldiers, they saw him coming. The cowardly soldiers began to run in every direction. Afraid of the onslaught of Al-Imam Al-Hussein, they began to gallop in every direction on their horses. From the stomping of the horses' feet, the sand of Karbala began to rise in the sky. Al-Imam Al-Hussein made his way to where he saw Qasim's body was located. He got down from his horse. He could not see Qasim. The sand of Karbala has ridden up into the sky. There is dust everywhere. Al-Imam Al-Hussein. Imam Hussein cannot see Qasim. He keeps calling out, Qasim, answer me. Qasim, raise your voice. Call to me, my son, where are you? No sound is coming. Finally, the dust begins to settle. It comes down to the ground. The air becomes clear. Imam Hussein sees the body of Qasim. He sees the body of Qasim ibn al-Hasan. He goes close to the body of Qasim. Approaching the body, he sees the body from the trampling of the horses, the enemy soldiers scurrying in every direction, stomping on the ground, have crushed the body of Qasim ibn al-Hasan. The arm has been torn from the body, the leg has been torn. Imam Hassan, he says, Ha ana ya Qasim, I have come to you, Qasim. Ya'izzu ala ammi أن تدعوه فلا يجيبك. It pains me, Qasim, that you called on me and I could not answer you. أو يجيبك فلا يعينك. Or he answers you but he cannot come to your help. Al-Imam Al-Hussein, what before would carry the bodies of his companions, fully grown men, on his chest back to the camp, now bends down on the body of Qasim ibn al-Hasan, broken into pieces from the stomping of the horses. How is he going to become? وقاسم وحسين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا آل محمد أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله. اللهم إنا نسألك وندعوك ونقسم عليك بحق الزهراء وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها والسر المستودع فيها، لعن الله ظالميها. اللهم شافي كل مريض، اللهم رد كل غريب، اللهم فك كل أسير، اللهم غير سوء حالنا بحسن حالك يا كريم. اللهم وفقنا لمراضيك وجنبنا معاصيك وثبت أقدامنا على صراطك المستقيم، وخذ بأيدينا إليك يا أرحم الراحمين، وفرج عنا يا الله فرجا عاجلا قريبا كلمح البصر أو هو أقرب من ذلك، وافرغ علينا صبرا وتوفنا مسلمين. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
دعاء الحجة. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
Ahsant, Sheikhna and Mehdi, for reciting that at the end. Thank you all for joining us. Again, we appreciate you guys coming out here to commemorate Imam Hussein. We'll see you all tomorrow again at 9:30 p.m. inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.